On today's episode of Locked On Oilers, what are the expectations within the crease? Plus, what is that third line going to look like come opening day? All that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to the Locked On Oilers podcast. I'm your host and former Oilers game day producer, Brett Holden. As mentioned on today's episode, we're going to start off in the crease. As what are the expectations for the Edmonton Oilers for Jack Campbell and Stuart Skinner? What happens when one of them goes down? How confident are you in Stuart Skinner or Jack Campbell to carry the way? All that good stuff that comes with goaltending controversies, as it's actually a nice controversy for the Oilers for once. We will talk about that in a little bit. Plus, later on in today's episode, what will that third line look like for the Edmonton Oilers, as you could throw up a whole bunch of different combinations, be rather confident in it, but what will it look like come opening day? Also later on today, the case to keep Jason Demers off of his PTO. We will talk about that and so much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. Alrighty, as mentioned, we are going to start off in the crease with Jack Campbell and Stuart Skinner, as Jack Campbell hasn't had any preseason action just yet. Stuart Skinner does start tonight against Calgary in Calgary. By the time you're watching this or listening to this, depending on your medium, probably over with, but before I am recording before the game. But Stuart Skinner has had a couple games under his belt already in the preseason. Stuart Skinner last year only got into about 13 games for the Edmonton Oilers, but what you saw from Stuart Skinner gave a lot of Edmonton Oilers fans some very, very positive feelings about the future. 6-6 during his time up in the NHL last year, a .262 goals against average and a .913 save percentage, considering where that defense was last year, and some other forecasts as well, depending on who was in front of him, and Mikko Koskinen and Mike Smith. Pretty solid numbers for the young goaltender. And again, the thing to remember, Stuart Skinner's only 23 years old. Now, the thing with Jack Campbell and Stuart Skinner comparing to Jack Campbell is Jack Campbell has had a .914 save percentage last year in Toronto, relatively comparable between the two, so that is nice, especially considering the defensive cores are pretty similar between Toronto and Edmonton. You can see just kind of how similar the workload and what you can expect from each player will be. Now, once Jack Campbell came into the organization, Ken Holland said in his press conference after free agency during basically the first day, saying that he basically expects about a 50-30 split between Jack Campbell and Stuart Skinner. Now, of course, if you watch hockey, you know that it's 82 games. So depending on which 52, depending on which 30, it could also be a 62-38 type thing, or you know what I'm saying, 32 type deal, so it seems like it's going to be a relatively decent balance, with the obvious workload going to Jack Campbell. Now, Jack Campbell has been known to maybe be a little inconsistent at times. He hasn't been the healthiest throughout his career. I'm not going to say he's had injury issues, but he has missed time because of injuries in the past. So how confident are the Edmonton Oilers in putting in Stuart Skinner for an injury circumstance? Maybe he has to play for a week or two straight to keep the Edmonton Oilers afloat. Because let's be real, Calvin Pickard, who would probably be the Edmonton Oilers' third goaltender, depending on the battle that happens down in Bakersfield as well. Because Ryan Fanti can just as easily take Calvin Pickard's spot as the third goaltender and earn that call-up if a Jack Campbell or a Stuart Skinner does go down to be that backup goaltender. But that's shaky in itself. Are the Edmonton Oilers, and are you, really confident in Stuart Skinner to be that goaltender, to tide the Edmonton Oilers in case of emergency? Me? I am. 100%. You've seen Stuart Skinner become an NHL goaltender from every step of the way. It was Cam Moon who mentioned it after one of the, I believe it was the Seattle Kraken game, I believe, where he went on to say that you've seen the maturation of Stuart Skinner from each step. It wasn't after Seattle. He didn't play against Seattle. It was Winnipeg. After the Winnipeg game, he said, you have seen every step of Stuart Skinner's career from when he played in high school, even before that, from Bantam. You've seen him play and become a WHL backup, WHL starter, a WHL champion, an ECHL starter, an AHL backup, an AHL starter, and let's be real, last year at times, Stuart Skinner looked like the best goaltender in the AHL. 27-7-7 down in Bakersfield last year, a 221 goals against average, and a 920 save percentage. 920, that's how we did after feeling comfortable in that system. And now you're seeing the maturation of a player turn into an NHL backup and hopefully soon at some point an NHL starter and push Jack Campbell for that spot. The Edmonton Oilers have done everything right when it comes to Stuart Skinner. They gave him time. Even last year when everybody said, start Stuart Skinner, get Stuart Skinner some time. I know to the dismay of a lot of people, Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen really pushed the way. But now you see the fruits of your labor out of that. Now you have a tandem that can be arguably one of the best in the Western Conference and arguably top 5, 10 even, probably, actually most likely 10, top 5 even in the league. Just because of how stable both goaltenders can be. And if you end up with a 40-40 split between the two, I don't think Ken Hall and Jay Woodcroft or the Edmonton Oilers organization would be too disappointed. Because that just means you have two very solid goaltenders on a team who needs goaltending to take the next step. If you're confident in two guys, you're probably going to do pretty well. Take a look at the Colorado Avalanche. And I think Stuart Skinner is ready to take that next step. I mean, Jack Campbell, I've talked very positively about him recently. I did, maybe not so much before the Oilers signed him and when the Oilers signed him, but he has grown on me, and I think the Edmonton Oilers and Jack Campbell are going to have a good season together. I really do. I'm really excited about this goaltending tandem, Jack Campbell, Stuart Skinner. There's a lot to be excited about in Edmonton in the Crease. We're going to leave the Crease behind and we're going to go up to the forward core as the Edmonton Oilers have a very interesting situation brewing, in their bottom six and more specifically on their third line. We will talk about that and just what might that third line look like in just a second. But first, I want to tell you about our partners over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all of your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, NBA, NHL, MMA, UFC, boxing, golf. They have esports, they have Mexican baseball, they've got it all. Head to BetOnline and use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Where we are going to continue on with is the third line of the Edmonton Oilers, as it seems like there's something interesting brewing there for the Edmonton Oilers. They have, well, really about 5 players that they can slot in confidently as that third line spot or in that third line spot, depending on what they want that line to look like in a situation. Now, those players are Dylan Holloway, who's been the best player on the ice every time he's been on the ice so far this preseason. You got Ryan Mcleod, who just signed that interesting deal for the Oilers. You have Jesse Puljujarvi, who wants top 6 minutes, might not get it, maybe more of a middle 6 guy. And then you have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who is a fantastic two-way hockey player. And Warren Fogle. Warren Fogle, who has been really, really impressing a lot of people in the organization recently in the preseason. And as well, Jay Woodcroft talked about him today in his press conference, and Warren Fogle also spoke today in a press conference as well. But Jay Woodcroft really talked about just how much of a gym freak almost Warren Fogle is, how much of an analytical beast he is, but also just how liked he is in the room. And that's been something that I have praised for Warren Fogle this entire offseason. And that's important for people within the group. Jay Woodcroft said people in the locker room love this guy. And that's not something you want to break up. So, Warren Fogle has said that he wants to make it onto the penalty kill. And that is how he's going to really, quote unquote, make the team and not force the Edmonton Oilers to move on from him and really create some cap space for them. So what does that third line look like? Well, I have about, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 line combinations, possible line combinations for the third line for the Edmonton Oilers, just to see really how they can take advantage of that third line and really get what they want out of the third line. The first combination I have is Dylan Holloway, Ryan Mcleod, and Jesse Puljujarvi. This has been the one that I have slotted since day one, really, of the offseason. I think this would be a beautiful third line, and especially with the way that Dylan Holloway has been playing in the preseason, I think this would just, the speed and the skill from Mcleod, Puljujarvi, and Holloway would just be loads and so many levels high above the third line that they'll be playing against, or the fourth line, or whatever line they will be playing against of the opposition. The skating skill that they have, Puljujarvi has a very underrated stride as well. I think Puljujarvi could just leave the puck for a Holloway or a Mcleod, let them do their thing, get into open ice, and really be effective. Plus, this is a two-way line here as well. Yes, Puljujarvi, I mean, people go, oh, he can't be that good defensively, other than the fact that he allows the least amount of goals. He can't be that good. Dylan Holloway has been an absolute spark plug in all zones. He's been a puck hawk. He's been all over puck carriers, laying the body. He's really been impressive. In fact, he's been playing on the penalty kill as well so far in the preseason. There's a lot of really good stuff going on in that line there. The second one, I have a little bit of an interesting one, but one to see If the Edmonton Oilers want to get a little defensive, I guess. But this one is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins on the wing with Ryan Mcleod and Warren Fogle. Now, I like this one because Warren Fogle is just a hard-nosed hockey player who's going to go into the dirty areas and really fight for the puck. He's going to do everything he can. He's a very solid skater. He throws some hits. And as he said, he's really made an emphasis of playing in the PK or on the PK, but that means he's also made an emphasis on playing in his own zone in general. Just because you're working on the penalty kill doesn't mean that you're not going to be a better defender in general. And that's what Warren Fogle has really worked on. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, one of the best two-way players in the league, and Ryan Mcleod is going to become Ryan Nugent-Hopkins 2.0. I think having that line all together, two guys in Ryan Mcleod and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who are two very calm players who read the game really well and really don't have to force the play, but really run the game to their own pace. And Warren Fogle can just be that almost like a crazy little dog on that line, just going post to post, or post to post, wall to wall, just battle to battle, getting everything done, and the other two just being a support valve for that dog. I think that would be a very interesting line for the Oilers. The third option for the Edmonton Oilers would be Warren Fogle, Ryan Mcleod, and Jesse Puljujarvi. I think this one is maybe the more, depending on where Dylan Holloway slots in the lineup, is the more likely scenario for the third line. Now, Warren Fogle has been playing on the left wing and as well on the right wing during training camp. The Edmonton Oilers are comfortable with him over on the right wing, as that is where he played in Carolina. So he has some confidence there and some experience playing there. And obviously, the Edmonton Oilers are comfortable with him playing there. But in this situation, Fogle would be on the left wing with Mcleod and Puljujarvi. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was the third line at the end of the playoffs last year for the Edmonton Oilers with Fogle, Mcleod, and Puljujarvi. I just think that's a very stable line, a very balanced line, a guy who can go and do it all and really wants to get dirty in Warren Fogle. You have kind of the mediator with Ryan Mcleod, and then you just have the whole opposite end of the spectrum with Jesse Puljujarvi, the guy who just kind of does everything he wants to, but still does it right. I think this would be a very interesting combination for the Edmonton Oilers and would really add some depth to their bottom six. Now, getting into maybe a little bit of the weird combinations, but combinations I think would work for the Edmonton Oilers. The first one being Warren Fogle, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Jesse Puljujarvi. Now, I have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins here on the third line because I think the Edmonton Oilers are not afraid to run for centers, obviously, but run the centers as Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Ryan Mcleod, who, if you ask me, is the best center core in the NHL. Now, if they do that, that means Ryan Nugent-Hopkins would be on the third line and Ryan Mcleod would be on the fourth line. This now basically would be the exact same line as the Fogle, Mcleod, Puljujarvi line, but instead of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins 2.0, you just straight up have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, a fantastic veteran, a guy who could really lead Jesse Puljujarvi in the right direction on a line, and just really know how to rein in a guy like Warren Fogle. I think that would be a very interesting line, and something that I think Ryan Nugent-Hopkins would welcome as well. I really like that line for them. Finally, the last two. This one's exciting, but the last one I think is one of my favorites, up there with the first line that I mentioned. The first line that I mentioned, I think, is the one they should go with. but I think this line will happen at some point, and it is going to be, or the last line, I should say, will happen at some point. This, before we get there, the second last line, sorry, I'm really pumping up this last line, but before we get there, I do have one more to throw at you. I have Dylan Holloway, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Warren Fogle. Now, as mentioned, Warren Fogle is playing, or has been playing, on the right wing, depending on where Jesse Puljujärvi is, if he's in the top six, on that first line, on that second line. That means Warren Fogle, or in general, there's a spot on that third line, and I think Warren Fogle would be able to take that spot up pretty well. And as well, having a guy like Dylan Holloway and Warren Fogle on the wings would just be a nightmare for the opposition. A lot of speed, a lot coming at you all at the same time. And then you get a facilitator like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins in the middle. That could be a real issue for the opposition. And now finally, my favorite line. I think this could be just a deadly line for the Edmonton Oilers. This third line of Dylan Holloway, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Jesse Puljujärvi. I think that line would just run amok in the NHL. One of the best lines in the league. Again, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is one of the best two-way forwards in the league. And when you're taking a look at your second or your third line, that is what you're looking for. Two-way players, a guy who can go out there and compress and really force the issue on the opposition's best players, but also go out there and force something in the opposition end. Jesse Puljujärvi is the exact same way, where he can really shut down and suffocate a puck carrier with the way that he skates and plays in his own end, and getting the puck to a Dylan Holloway who is beyond motivated, who has the motor beyond anybody I've seen in a very long time. I think that would be a very special line for the Oilers. My top three, I think most likely, or my favorite one, or what I would go with, is the Holloway, Mcleod, Puljujärvi line. The one that I think is most likely is the Fogle, Mcleod, Puljujärvi line, but I would love to see Holloway, Nugent-Hopkins, and Puljujärvi. That would be fantastic. Also, I didn't give any love there to Warren Fogle, too, in those lines. Shout out Warren Fogle. I hope he has a good season this year. A lot of people have been talking very positive things about him over the last couple of days, so hopefully he gets his shot for the Edmonton Oilers. Speaking of getting a shot for the Edmonton Oilers, a PTO on the back end for the Edmonton Oilers has gone pretty well for the most part, but it's gone under the radar. I want to talk about the potential of Jason Demers staying with the Edmonton Oilers and what that would look like for the team and Demers himself in just a second. But first, I just want to thank you for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, make sure you tune in to Locked On NHL, where Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date with everything in the hockey world with Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. As we turn the page here and finish up on the back end, we should have went goaltenders, defense, and forwards, but that's okay. We'll end off from defense forwards, or goaltenders forwards to the defense, as Jason Demers is on a professional tryout contract with the Edmonton Oilers. And I could see the Edmonton Oilers giving him a contract. Now, he hasn't really been doing anything exceptional, especially when it comes to score sheet stuff, or really putting himself out there as a demanding defenseman. But from the behind the scenes stuff and the way a lot of people have talked about Jason Demers, he was available for a press conference today for the Edmonton Oilers. A lot of positive things from Jason Demers and for Jason Demers over the training camp and preseason. Now he has been teamed up or paired up with Marcus Niemelainen, which tells me that A, the Edmonton Oilers want Marcus Niemelainen to learn from an NHL defenseman, or at least a former NHL defenseman, a veteran NHL defenseman. And in that case as well, it also tells me that Jason Demers playing him with Marcus Niemelainen shows him also trust in being that mentor for the younger players. Now, that gets me to my point as to why I think the Edmonton Oilers might bring Jason Demers in. The Edmonton Oilers have a lot of young defensemen who will be and potentially might make the Edmonton Oilers. Obviously, there's Philip Broberg, Marcus Niemelainen, Dmitry Samorukov, Michael Kesselring. We can even get into Vinny Desharnais, Phil Kemp as well. There are a lot of guys in the Edmonton Oilers organization who are young and need to kind of adapt to the game in the NHL and the life of being an NHLer. The Edmonton Oilers also did not bring back Chris Russell, which Chris Russell didn't play every game for the Edmonton Oilers last year, but was very important for the Edmonton Oilers organization if he was in the lineup or when he wasn't in the lineup. Jason Demers can fill in a very similar spot for the Edmonton Oilers, and you've seen him get along with a lot of the Edmonton Oilers as well. I mean, you could see the dynamic as well if you watched, if you were at the Saturday scrimmage for the Edmonton Oilers. Him and Vander Kane get along pretty well. There was a video that came out with Vander Kane and Ryan Mcleod, and who came in? It was Jason Demers, and they all started laughing and having fun together. Jason Demers seems to have been kind of a glue guy that the Edmonton Oilers are looking for on their back end. Again, he doesn't have to play every game, but as long as he's there, that's something that's different. Now, where does he fit in? Now, first of all, what if Philip Broberg doesn't fill out that spot? What if he ends up being sent to Bakersfield because they still don't think he's ready? Well, first of all, that's going to create a lot of outrage for a lot of people. But that just means he got outplayed by somebody. Now, if Philip Broberg's not playing every game, they're not going to keep him on the NHL roster. They'll send him back to the AHL and get him full-time minutes. So then who takes a spot? Well, first of all, that would mean a Marcus Niemelainen, a Vinny Desharnais, who hopefully can make it back for some games before the end of the preseason. Doesn't sound like he will, as he's week to week with a hand injury, but we shall see. But that also means a Dmitry Samorukov has also probably played well enough to have Philip Broberg sent back to the AHL. So that also means there's probably a seventh defenseman spot to be had. Jason Demers would be able to fit that spot very, very well. Now, plus as well, what if somebody gets hurt? What if Darnell Nurse gets hurt? What if Cody Cece's hamstring isn't 100% ready? What if Kulak gets hurt? Bouchard, Broberg, Barry, any of these guys? What happens if any of them get injured? Are you confident enough in Niemelainen, in Samorukov, in Kesselring, in whoever ends up coming up, Desharnais, in keeping the ship afloat? Or do you trust a veteran, 34-year-old guy who's played over 600 games in the NHL and go, okay, guy, we need you to ready the ship a little. Can you do that for us? As a guy who's been through a lot of situations, he's probably going to go, heck yeah, bring it on. I think Jason Demers can very, very, very much benefit the Edmonton Oilers and benefit from the Edmonton Oilers. Plus, I think he can, if Philip Broberg does not make the Edmonton Oilers, he can pair up with a Tyson Barrie and give Tyson Barrie that almost a push to be more offensive and not have to worry about being a leader for a Philip Broberg and be that more defensive defenseman that he probably would be with the shackles of Philip Broberg. Being able to trust a Jason Demers and go up and join the rush and be able to trust that you have a guy who's very, very good at what he does. Sit back there and be calm and make a play. I could see Jason Demers making a league minimum contract, signing a contract for the Edmonton Oilers, but I don't know. What do you think? Do you think, am I out to lunch here? Am I speaking too much about a tryout? I've been known to speak a little too much about a professional tryout, but you let me know. What do you think? How has Jason Demers done so far for the Edmonton Oilers in training camp? Let's call it there, as the Edmonton Oilers are playing the Calgary Flames tonight, as you're probably listening to this or watching this after they play. But if not, let's go Oilers. And first Battle of Alberta this year. Come on. That's nothing for us, right, Calgary? Yeah, we'll talk about 4-1s later. Anyways, let's call it there. As mentioned, what a beautiful day it was today. I hope you stay safe. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. And play La Bamba, baby.